Now, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, our guest is in the house, and I'd like to introduce to you a guy. Well, I've seen him ringside for it has to be 20 years, but he's always got the best seat in the house. He's currently the Fight News Editor-in-Chief. Please welcome Boxing Bob Newman. What's up, brother?
Hey, Billy. See, everything's up. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Good. It's pouring here right now where I am, so I'm happy to be inside talking to you.
That's the right way. I mean, because we wouldn't be doing it in the rain. I'm not holding an umbrella for you, not from
No,
here anyway.
I don't want to hold one for myself.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, you're in the perfect spot. But glad you are taking the time to join us. I got a bunch of things I want to ask you, so I'm going to start with this question. You've seen a ton of fights. You've been ringside for a lot of them. What was the craziest experience that you've had covering a fight? I mean, does anything stick out?
Well, I mean, there's been a few. I mean, there's crazy, there's tragic, which nobody likes to see in boxing. I mean, I almost had a fighter fall on me through the ropes. Right, like there's actually a picture of me trying to get out of the way and at the same time kind of hold the guy's head. It was a heavyweight fight at the Turning Stone where you and I have been many times together covering shows. And he got knocked through the ropes. And this was a guy that was, I'm big enough. He was bigger than me. And yeah, he almost fell on top of me. So that was one. At a fight in Berlin in Germany, kind of a tragic situation. But what made it crazy was the aftermath. There was a 3-0 kid fighting a guy with had fights like in the teens, I don't remember, 13, 14, 15 fights. And this was a 10-rounder. And it was under kind of a newly, quickly thrown together commission in Germany. And the 3-0 kid was winning. He was the promoter's fighter. But as you can imagine, he was getting more tired as the fight went on. And later in the fight, I don't remember if it was 7th or 8th round, the other guy was seasoned, had gone that distance probably several times, and he threw a vicious left hook, missed, threw it again, missed, and the third time, I mean, it was right out of a Rocky movie. Nobody throws, a left hook that many times in a row without a jab in between or whatever, but he finally connected on the third one, and this poor kid was out, and it was a fiasco with this newly formed commission and the ambulance, the whole thing. They were trying to pull the mouthpiece out like it was a chew toy with a dog, and then finally, because the kid's jaw was so clenched, they couldn't get it out, so they just let go, and his head thumped back to the canvas. And then when they finally got him on the stretcher, they didn't strap him in, and they had to go around 2 corners of the ring, and he almost fell off. And that was a bad thing. But I mean, fighters falling through the ropes, a ring breaking, the metal structure of the ring collapsed, and they had to basically stop the fight and I think call it a no contest. That was in Rochester, New York. Yeah, a few crazy things like that.
You just reminded me. I'm trying to. I'm remembering some crazy things I saw, and there was one in. I think it was Dorchester, Mass. I was covering a fight. Actually, I had a fighter on the card, and it was in an old armory. And what was strange about it, first of all, was there was no dressing rooms. There was one big area where both the red corner, blue corner, male and female, were all changing, and which was strange. And it was raining. Bob, it was raining, and there was a leak in the roof right over the center of the ring, and
man.
they just kept going. It was bizarre. But hey, do you remember? I forget who the fighter was, but it was in Russia, and it was a fight, and the Russian dude got really banged up, and they stopped the fight, and they actually had the medical staff tending to him, and it was like a good minute and a half, and then they continued to fight. They let the fight continue after they patched him up in the middle of the round. Do you remember that fight?
Wow, that's something similar to that sounds familiar, but I don't know about Russia.
It was definitely in Russia. It was the Russian fighter.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of reminds me of was the Olympics, and I believe it was, geez, I'm trying to remember if it was 92 or 96 with Montel Griffin, and remember Torsten Mai, the German fighter, and he had been cut in a previous fight, but he won the fight and he advanced, and he had like this black hardened, like all I could call it is tar over the cut, and they let him fight like that, and he eliminated Montel Griffin from the competition with that black tar over his eye that sealed his cut from the previous fight, which was crazy.
Some of the stuff in boxing you can't make up. Hey, not many people know this. I happen to know because I follow you, and tell us about your goal for covering fights in all 50 states, and where are you at?
Well, that's I have to not take credit for that as an original idea. I'm sure you remember the late great correspondent Jack Obermeyer, KOJO.
Yes, sir.
From New Jersey. Well, years ago when I was just a fanboy, I was reading either, it could have been Flash, Boxing Update, which if you remember those pre-internet, or The Ring or Boxing Illustrated. But in one of his pieces, which were always not only informative but hilarious to read, because he would also rate all the diners that he went to. He would say, like New Fight Town number 327 and New Diner number, 289 or whatever. But at the end of one of his pieces, he talked about his goal of covering boxing in all 50 states. And I thought, wow, that is really cool. That's awesome. And who knows, who knew that years later, one of the earliest shows I ever covered, I was sitting right next to Jack Obermeyer at the Turning Stone. It was Mark Too Sharp Johnson when he was flyweight champ. And he defended his title at the Turning Stone there. And so the first fight I ever covered, I think I was photographing, but then I would go back to my seat in between rounds. And this was film days before digital, or at least I didn't have a digital camera then. And that was his idea. And sadly, he got to 49 before he passed away. And the one state he didn't get was Alaska.
I was just going to say, they don't even have a commission in Alaska. That's what I was going to ask you.
Well, here's the crazy thing, though. In what I would call his heyday in the 80s as a writer, and he was well into it by then, but in the 80s alone, you had Alexis Arguello, Pat Jefferson, you had Rocky Lockridge defending his junior lightweight title against Tai-Jin Moon. And Rocky Lockridge, he wasn't born and raised in New Jersey, but at that time he was promoted by the Duvas, who were in Jersey, which is where Jack was from. And I would have thought he would have, finagled a credential or a flight on the plane or something through, knowing the Duvas or whatever. You had Jerry Cooney, I think, against Phil Brown, Hector Camacho against John Montez, and later on, George Foreman against Frank, remember Gator Lux? I think he was a journeyman heavyweight on his comeback. All of those were in the 80s, and he didn't go to one of them, which boggles my mind. But somewhere along the line, and I don't know if I, thought about this when Jack passed or what, because I didn't ever. It took me a while to find out where he was at in his count, and it wasn't until after he passed that I found out he got to 49, just one shy of his goal. But right now, I am at 39. So 11 more to go, and I've included in that District of Columbia. It's not a state, but it's kind of its own little entity, and it's part of the United States. I just recently did that a little while ago with a fight that was a wild upset. Jordan White was supposed to have defended his NABF junior lightweight title, and he came in overweight, and then he lost the fight on top of it. No, I'm sorry, my apologies. His opponent came in overweight, and and let me back up. It was lightweight. He moved up, and it was going to be for the vacant lightweight title. He lost. Not only did he lose, the opponent who beat him, Tellez, didn't win the title because he won the fight, but he was overweight, so he wasn't eligible. But there's DC. I've already checked them off the list. Probably 4 times in the U.S. Virgin Islands when Samson Lukowicz had signed the brothers there, Julian Jackson's sons, Julius and John Jackson. He signed them after the Beijing Olympics and did their first 4 pro fights in the Virgin Islands. And through my connections with him, he brought me down every time because, he wanted to get those boys covered. So did that as well. But 11 to go. So a couple more fights and I'll be in the single-digit countdown.
There you go. It's funny. I met Jack too at the Turning Stone. I didn't even realize it was him, to be honest with you. It was kind of embarrassing.
Well, all you had to do was wait and listen, and you would have realized it was him because you remember him and his constant companion, J.R. Jowett, and they would be yelling, especially if they were fights in Jersey or in and around Philly, stop the fight, and they'd yell at the ref, and they were a couple of characters, and Jeff is still with us.
Well, the thing is when I met him, it was at the Turning Stone for the Hall of Fame, right? So then the next morning, you talk about the diners. I ended up, being one of the guys that was all eating at that diner in Canastota, and he was with us, So,
oh, that's great.
It was cool.
So you've won up to me because there would be several times I'd say, hey, and I'd tell him about a couple of really cool, unique diners in Syracuse, and I wanted to take him to breakfast or whatever, but he was, by the end of those weekends, or if it was just a fight night, he was always eager to race back home. So sadly, I never got the chance to take him out to Stella's or a couple other places.
Yeah, well, like I said, I felt like an idiot because I didn't even know him when I was sitting next to him that Friday night. Then it was the card show. And before the card show, I went out to breakfast with a couple other people, and he was with them.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, it was cool. So then I act like we were best buds, But
no, he kind of had a tight inner circle, but I tried my best to penetrate the circle, and we joked about a few things and that here and there, but didn't get the diner date with him.
So you've covered a lot of these sanctioning bodies conventions. What's that like, man?
Oh man, you know what? First of all, it depends on which convention you're at. So they're
that different. They're that different, Bob?
Well, in size sometimes, and it also depends where they are, how many people come. When a convention is happening in the States, obviously they get a lot more attendees, and only recently have the sanctioning bodies started opening the conventions to the public. So I just came back, technically Saturday morning. I got back after midnight Friday, coming into Saturday from the WBO convention in Bogota, Colombia. And they opened that to the public for the first time. So I would say it didn't attract a lot of, let's say, boxing fan public people from America, because they just, they wouldn't come down. But there was a ton of youth boxing club kids in attendance there, young people. And on the scope of the size and pulling out all the stops, and I don't normally cover the WBO. We have another guy, Dave Finger from New Mexico, who kind of by default became the Fight News representative to cover the WBO conventions because of a work situation I had a few years ago where I couldn't get the time. So, when I was a normal working stiff and had a regular job. So Dave has been the WBO guy since. So I've only covered 2022, 3 years ago, and then just this year. But they got the Bogota Chamber of Commerce involved in like really helping financially and in other manners with this convention. So this was massive in terms of the space it took up in this convention center. They had a live boxing show on the 5th floor and meetings on the 3rd floor, and on the 1st floor was just this massive. They had a swag shop. They had a boxing ring. They had people with the VR headsets, the virtual reality with the gloves on, and they were, you could go in the ring and I guess I didn't do it, but fight a virtual opponent or whatever. So there was a lot of things going on, but I would say, the WBC's is massive in both size and scope and the number of things they have going on, a lot of times simultaneously. So when you ask what it's like, if you're there as a fan, you're like probably a kid in a candy store, because they bring a lot of champs, both contemporary current champs and old ones, depending on what country it's in or whatever. But to cover an event, which is why I'm there, it's a handful. It's quite challenging to sometimes, like I said, there's meetings simultaneously in different rooms, and like one of the biggest touchstone meetings is the ratings and then the mandatory challengers meeting, where they look and see, well, when's the last time a mandatory defense was made in this weight class? Well, this champion is like way overdue. We're not going to allow step aside so that he can fight maybe a more well-known guy for a lucrative purse. So those are always nuts, where you have managers and promoters there stumping for their fighters, sometimes getting in arguments or very heated debates with the the board, whether it's the ratings board or the ratings chairman or the championship committee. So sometimes I'm trying to be at this meeting, and then maybe the referees seminar, the judges seminar, which all the sanctioning bodies conduct those seminars, and they are all ABC accredited, so Association of Boxing Commissions. So the judges and the refs that attend and the instructors, get their their CEUs, if you will, kind of their credits that show that they're up to date with their credentials, if you want to call it that. And so there's lots going on. So as a a correspondent, a photographer, or maybe trying to get interviews, it's hectic. There's a lot of late nights and then early mornings, editing and going through photos and double checking for typos and things like that. And now I'm not the writer that's submitting these things to my former editor. After I do all those checks and everything, then I've got to upload it. So, and all at the same time, there's news coming in that has nothing to do with that convention. Fight results, weigh-ins, press releases for press conferences, all sorts of stuff. So it can be hectic, but it is a lot of fun. And I know that there are lots of folks out there, fans, people involved in boxing, that would give, their right leg to be in those shoes and have a chance to kind of rub elbows with all those people in the sport. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
There's no doubt about that. I love, as much as it can kill you, and I've lost, from a financial standpoint, I've lost tons and tons of money with the sport of boxing, but it's really true. Once that boxing bug gets you, there's no, you can't leave, whether it's, rewarding financially or not. It's always rewarding mentally, because I'm like you. I love it. I try to do as much as I can with the sport, whatever opportunity opens up. But listen, it's a good segue here for my next question, because you mentioned these conventions and the different sanctioning bodies and how they're done. My question to you here is the UFC model, right? The
Yeah.
UFC model that's so successful. In a way, the sanctioning bodies are kind of like that, and promoters are kind of leaning towards that. Where for a while there, the promoter wouldn't let his fighter fight another promoter's fighter, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that a UFC model could work in the sport of boxing at this stage of the game? I mean, when you look at UFC, it started like that, and then the success just everybody wanted to emulate it. But boxing's been around for hundreds of years, really. Do you think a UFC model could work in boxing ever?
Well, you know what? I mean, obviously that's a hot topic right now, and that was a very hot topic at this recent WBO convention last week. And so there are, different aspects or multiple aspects to a model. So, there's a lot going on where, you've got promoters, you've got sanctioning bodies in boxing that are really bristling at what is being suggested with Zuffa and TKO and by Dana White. I mean, Dana White has blatantly come out and said he's going to put the sanctioning bodies out of business and make all those belts irrelevant, and it'll just be, I'm assuming, the ring belt, which he's involved with. With
No, it's Bob. I don't mean to interrupt you, but he's
Sure.
actually talking about creating a Zuffa boxing belt.
Well, yeah, if it's not the ring belt, then it's their own belt.
Right.
And it's, I mean, here's what I think right now, because I think a lot of this is really still preliminary. You know what? It's just like each sanctioning organization that along the way over the last, well, I mean, the WBA used to be the NBA, so they've been around, 100 years, but you had the WBC start in '63, and then the IBF in '83, and then the WBO in '88. So in one sense, hey, those organizations were born, and much like, let's say, this Zuffa belt or whatever they want to call it, will be born. So on the one hand, if they want to do their own thing and have their own fighters fight for that belt, I think everybody else will say, fine, good for you, have at it. But to say in doing so, we're also going to take all you other sanctioning bodies, organizations out of commission, that's a whole nother ballgame. So, and to not let their fighters fight for those belts, and if they do, then they're out of Zuffa, and they're not going to be working with Dana White. Right now, and I don't know this, personally, I've watched interviews, for example, with Eddie Hearn, and he said fighters, they want belts, and yeah, Zuffa, I guess, is going to have their own belt, but it's like they're going to be fighting for a belt that no one's ever heard of before. So, I mean, there's that aspect of the model. I know there's a lot of talk, and I, in the beginning, as a fan, when UFC itself, now obviously it's broader, it's MMA, because you've got so many different entities within MMA. I used to watch those UFC pay-per-views that would come on, but nobody back then, there was no internet. We didn't know about these kind of clandestine pay structures and what those guys were getting paid, and a lot of the behind the scenes. I mean, the only reason anybody knows anything now about what's happening in boxing is because of the internet. But a lot of that is conjecture and, false nonsense that comes out on the internet. Everything from fights being signed that aren't truly signed, to how much somebody got made, so on and so forth, how much they got paid. There are certain aspects of the structure that I don't think is going to work in boxing, because for all what everybody says about the sanctioning organizations and they're shady and cryptic and corrupt and all that, there's a lot of transparency, and people know what fighters make. They know what belt they're fighting for. And now, you remember, you've been around long enough. We remember the days where unification fights were a no-no. I mean, I remember Michael Nunn, IBF middleweight champ, signing to fight Sumbu Kalimbe, WBA champ. Kalimbe got stripped before he stepped in the ring because those organizations wanted their autonomy, and now it's all about unifications. It's higher purses, which means higher sanctioning fees and more attention on the sport and more clarity. You have less and less champions as they fight each other, and kind of working for a while to have one champ in each weight category. So will Zuffa go forward with their plans? Yeah, as far as trying to eradicate and get this UBO, this Universal Boxing Organization thing, passed into law. The Muhammad Ali Revival Act, or the American Boxing Revival Act, that remains to be seen. I can tell you it was a big subject, and one of the themes at the WBO convention, they had it on banners and posters, and on their backdrop behind them was hashtag belts matter. And that was a not so veiled reference to fighters want to fight for belts that they know, and we're not going anywhere. So
I don't. My thought on it is it's too late, and the reason why I say that is in order for that to work, he would have to, meaning Dana White, and if Turki Al-Rashid is involved or whatever, they would have to. Let's face it, we all know what drives the sport of boxing, and that's money. So if all of a sudden they were throwing huge purses at fighters and stuff, I could see fighters running and jumping into bed with them, just like the promoters did with Turki Al-Rashid. However, that's not how the UFC model works. They try to share revenue with, from advertising dollars, et cetera, et cetera. So it would be a sell. You'd have to sell that idea and that concept to the pool of fighters, which is small anyway, right? I mean, compared to the way it was, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the pool of fighters is limited. And that's one of the problems we have with the sanctioning bodies, because there's so many belts. And like you said, they say, oh, everybody wants to fight for a belt. Well, that's half the problem, because it's diluted. There's too many belts, right?
Right.
So in order for this to work, not only would they need the cooperation of the fighters, and like you also mentioned, revising the Muhammad Ali Act, it would only work for so long, because all it takes would be a Turki Al-Rashid type of a guy to say, hey, fighter A and fighter B, forget the Zuffa boxing belt. We're going to give you X amount of money to come fight for the boxing Bob Newman belt. And as quickly as they can sign the paper, they'll be doing it. And that's the truth. So I don't think that model, at least the way the UFC is set up now, could work. And I thought it was as successful and as smart as Dana White has proven to be. I think his approach, which was basically, there's a new sheriff in town, I'm taking over, did not go over well. And I know it pissed Eddie Hearn off.
Oh, it's not going to go over well when, you don't want a bully walking in and saying, I'm here, things, there's a new sheriff in town and things are going to change, when he's involved in combat sports, MMA, but it's not boxing. And like you said, boxing has been around for hundreds of years. It's been around since the ancient Olympics in one form or another. And it's, for better or for worse, they have a model that's going to work. And as at times unpolished and kind of wild west, anything goes as it is, it's working more or less, at least, for those involved and for those that are successful. Of course, there's, lots of people that never make it to the top, only a very small percentage make it to the top. But it's, I think when they passed the Muhammad Ali Act, all those years ago, that was things going in the right direction. And one thing they touched on at the convention was some of the wording that it's called, and I may get this slightly wrong, I'm paraphrasing, but the Muhammad Ali Revival American Boxing Act or something like that. So, whatever law they pass here is only going to affect boxing in America. You can't enforce that around the world. And right now, listen, boxing is, it's huge in Japan. They have a load of champions, Inoue notwithstanding. It's big in England.
UK is hot. I mean,
UK is hot. Russia's kind of a sticky wicket right now with the war going on and all that, and that was discussed at the convention as well, as far as sanctioning fights and fighters from Russia or fights happening in Russia. They can happen, but they're not going to have any sanctioning body. They're not going to get a blessing from any of the sanctioning bodies as far as world titles from the four main organizations being contested in Russia.
It could be an easy fix, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, that's okay.
It could be an easy fix. You see, we've proven, and these promoters have learned throughout the years, that you can't be standalone in the sport of boxing. Don King and Bob Arum, they hated each other, but when the right fights had to be made, they sat down and they made those fights, and we were treated to all those fantastic fights,
sure,
during the 80s and 90s. The promoters evolved into, nope, where, PBC kind of started it. We're just having our guys and blah, blah, blah. And, the truth of the matter is they realized, these promoters, that they have to work nice. So as we're improving and getting better, now all of a sudden you got Dana White coming in, and it seems like it's regressing the mindset of the sport. That's at least, my opinion. I just want to comment to somebody in the chat room.
Sure.
He's saying UK has been hot going on 10 years. Listen, I've been saying all along for at least 10 years that I feel the UK carries boxing on its back. And the main reason, there's two. One, the fighters fight each other. They're not afraid to lose their O. And number two, the fight fans seem to know more about the sport than they do here in the U.S. They're fanboys in the U.S., but they're boxing fans in the U.K. That's the way I look at it anyway, Bob. What's your quick thoughts on that?
No, I probably would. I would have to agree to a certain extent. Obviously having gone to more fights here than in other countries, but I think I've got, in addition to the 39 states, I think I've got like 22 countries under my belt as well outside the U.S. I can speak that, in the U.S., where we get to sit, press row or ringside even, sometimes I hear some really, I don't want to be rude and say stupid, but just some really annoying comments that are coming out of fans' mouths where you can tell they don't even know what they're watching, who they're watching.
Bob, there's so many of them, and I use the line. I actually stole. I have to give credit. Bob Miller, and I know you knew Bob Miller.
Mm-hmm.
He always said it every time we were going to fights or whatever. And now I use his phrase, and he used to say it all the time. He's going, half of these fans don't know the difference between a left hook and a fish hook,
Yeah.
And it's
I love
true,
that.
though. It's true, though. You hear, and they've been programmed to think that if there's an O on the record, that means they're good. But
no.
Anyway.
No, you use the internet and go and see who they got their O against, all those wins. And you look and see more than half their opponents have an upside down record, a sub 500 record.
Well, that's exactly what I try to point out when I break down fights. Look at the records. Look at the records of the records. But
yeah, the one of the worst comments I heard, and it was.
Hey, Bob, there's people in the chat room saying, Bob, don't apologize. Stupid is 100% correct.
I'm trying not to be too rude.
No, you don't have to be on this show. I can't be. I'm cancel proof, bro. Come on.
All right.
Unbutton your collar, take your tie off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But there was a fight. the Brazilian fighter Robson Conceição, and he had a couple of fights there with Oshaki Foster. Finally, on his fourth attempt, he finally won a junior lightweight title, and then he lost it right back. But before he was champ, he was fighting in Turning Stone, and I think that was on a card. Matter of fact, I'm certain I know what card it was. It was Oscar Rivas, the Colombian who was fighting out of Canada, the heavyweight, was fighting Brian Jennings, defense of his NABF heavyweight title. And Shakur Stevenson was on that card fighting her for his first belt of any sort, and it was a Continental Americas title for WBC. I had the good fortune I wasn't covering that show for Fight News. I was actually supervising both of those fights for the NABF and for the WBC. And so I was sitting where the commission sits. And as is the case every now and again, I guess if you have friends and people, sometimes you can get for one fight, you get to sit, you get a credential around your neck. And so that was the case with these 2 or 3 guys that were sitting next to me. They kind of came in for this one fight, and it happened to be Robson Conceição's fight. And if you remember, he's stylist. He's not a young guy. He's well into his 30s, and he's not a puncher at all. Most of his fights go the distance, but he's a super chiseled guy. Like, he's probably got 2% body fat, but he can't punch. And this one guy sitting next to me is talking to his buddy, who I guess didn't know as much as this guy next to me thought he knew. And he's telling him, he's going, "Look at the muscles in his back. That's where all the punching power comes from." And I didn't hide it. I just hung my head. I didn't say anything, but I kind of shook my head a little bit, and it's like, oh man, no. Now, first of all, this guy, like I said, he's a stylist. He wins on points. He doesn't knock hardly anybody out unless maybe he cuts them. And that is not where the punching power comes from. I mean, I learned as a little kid, not just watching the fights, but paying attention to what the analysts say and whatever. And they talk about the legs and leverage and all that. And, you had a skinny guy like Mark Breland or Tommy Hearns, but they stopped guys because they knew the mechanics and how to throw the punch, and they weren't arm punchers. And, but yeah, listening to some of the things that come out of this, we got here, I guess, talking about, the knowledge of American fans versus, let's say, British fans or whatever.
Yeah, the UK fans are much more. Listen, I got a person in the Southpaw in the chat room goes by Southpaw. He's got a question for you. He says, have you ever done any boxing? How did you get into the sport? He must see my list because I have that on one of my questions. What got you into boxing? So, Southpaw is asking you the question. So,
I'm wondering which Southpaw this is, because I know it's Southpaw, who has that moniker as part of his name. So obviously I was old enough to, see Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier's fights in the 70s. But what really got me hooked was the 76 Olympics. I was 12 at the time, so I'm divulging here. But in some cases, like the flyweight Leo Randolph, he was actually still in high school. He was 18, the flyweight gold medalist. And I just, that was a time, 12 years old. I had just finished elementary school. And, that's the age where you're kind of reaching adolescence and you get into fights. And I was a skinny kid, believe it or not, who was an easy mark to get picked on and things like that. And I just remember being in awe of these young men, in some cases teenagers, in that ring. And remember, back then there was no headgear, wasn't like what they did with the amateurs in the Olympics later, but to me, seemingly fearless, and wondering how they're hitting each other in the face. How are they not turning their back and saying, "I don't want to fight"? And I was just in awe of them, how they could harness their fear, which, I learned later with, reading and listening to interviews with Cus D'Amato and Mike Tyson about how fear is your friend and you need it, to be in boxing and how to utilize it in your favor. But it really kind of, I got bit by the bug with those guys. And then about 9 years later, in '85, for some reason, I have no idea why, there was a fight coming on HBO that night, Larry Holmes against David Bay. And I ran out to one of our local electronics stores and I bought a VCR for the express purpose of recording that fight that night, which I did. And for many, many, many years after that, I recorded every fight off the air that that I could watch, that I knew was going to be on. And now, I mean, with the internet and YouTube and all this other stuff, it's kind of made that you know, irrelevant. You know, it got to a point where I was providing fight footage to HBO and ESPN and to managers who needed scouting footage on their opponent and they had never seen any. And I made a lot of friends around the world trading tapes and trying to get footage from other countries that I read about these guys like Jeff Fennick and Brian Mitchell and the Galaxy brothers in Thailand, but I had never seen them. And so that was kind of like the next phase of my involvement in the sport, of my fandom, so to speak. And then right around the same time as Fight News got created, 98, 99, my brother, who's a computer whiz, created a web page for me. And I used that web page, and the internet was, you know, still kind of new in terms of web pages, especially focused on, you know, a certain subject matter like boxing. But I was able to use that as a way to get my foot in the door and get press credentials to be ringside. And I remember I tried for Tito Trinidad against Pernell Whitaker at the Garden. And when I look back now, and you'll get a kick out of this, the public relations guy, and for a while I knew his name, I don't remember it anymore. That was quite a while ago. He said, "What paper, what magazine do you write for?" And I said, "Well, it's a web page, and you know it's called ringrap.com." And he said, "The internet. He goes, that's going to be a passing fad."
Hey, that internet thing's never gonna make it, you
Yeah.
know.
And at the time, I felt, you know, I was kind of crushed, and you know, and of course, I thought, oh, what a jerk, you know. But who knew? Now, you know, what's a newspaper? What's a magazine?
That's I always say, kidding around to people, I go, yeah, that AI, that's not gonna stick around much longer, you know. But
Yeah,
hey, you know,
yeah.
it's funny. I did the same thing with recording tape, you know, taping every fight on TV. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was a huge Boom Boom Mancini fan,
Mm,
and when he fought Livingstone Bramble, the
mhm.
first fight, it was the weekend. I went on my honeymoon and I went to Puerto Rico. So I set the VCR up because you could, you know, set it to record automatically. And I went
Yeah,
and I made sure I didn't know the result and all of this stuff. I come back, you know, 10 days later and, you know, fire up the old VCR and it's going. And if you recall, I mean, both the fights were good, but that first one was exceptional.
right.
And it gets to the 10th round and I ran out of tape. Like
Oh,
I
no.
never, so it took me another month. Now I still didn't know the result. Okay. Took me another month and I finally found someone else who taped it. And I had to give him the tape. We had to get two VCRs, right? And still, I didn't want to
Yeah,
know the result. And after all of that, I finally watched the last two rounds and Boom Boom loses. And I was like, I suffered through all of this. I was expecting him to win,
yeah,
you know, but
yeah.
anyway, so listen, you're now the editor-in-chief of Fight News. What does that mean to you? What is? I know you've been involved with the site a long time. I personally follow that site since it came out. My website was invented right around the same time as Fight News was, so it's been a website I've always you know, went to. I love the concept of it. Now you're the editor-in-chief. What does that mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that you know, I'm glad we still have the site, and that's, you know, kind of part of the story. You know, Carl Freitag, who came up with the concept, and really, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the first, if not the first, boxing media site, boxing only on the internet. And it was a long haul. You may remember he had his business partner Flat Top, who was with him pretty much since the beginning, and he passed away. And it got to be tough going, for Carl in the last several years. And he and I were pretty close. I actually, in my regular job, worked nights, and I would chat and DM with him a lot because he would stay up for years to get stuff from overseas and from Japan. And when press releases first thing in the morning would be like the middle of the night here. A lot of times he would be chatting, and anyway, he let me know that he felt like it was coming to an end, and he wasn't really sure how he was going to keep it going, but he kept it going for as long as he felt he could. And I kid you not, this past summer in July, he texted me a couple hours after I got home from work, and I was just getting ready to go to bed, and I had just made up my mind that I was going to retire from my job. That morning, I decided, when I go back to work tonight, and then when I leave, before I leave tomorrow morning, I'm going to put in my notice that I'm retiring. And I get a text from Carl that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to keep the site going anymore, and he thought that weekend was going to be the last weekend for Fight News. And I panicked, kind of selfishly, because that's been not my bread and butter financially, but that's been my door to boxing, to being on the inside, so to speak, covering the fights, going to the conventions, and so on and so forth. And I thought, oh no, I can't let this happen. And I made a call, and the next thing you know, we'll just kind of fast forward for now on that. A transaction was made, and Fight News stayed alive. So first of all, for me, that's like the main thing that I'm excited about, is that we're still here, and the crew. There's a lot of diehard originals that are still writing, and a couple that are still photographing for us from way back. And I let them know, because nobody really knew that this was possibly going to be happening, that Fight News might disappear. And they, first of all, they were stunned. They were like, holy cow, thanks for letting us know. And then, oh my God, thanks that, we're going to keep it going. So in that sense, it means a lot to me to, still have these opportunities that being involved with Fight News brings. As far as assuming the editor-in-chief role, it's not really, I didn't think about it really too much. It's just kind of like, I was on the journey, I mean, I know you've heard this saying, life's not a destination, it's a journey. And that's really how I've kind of looked at things, because when you get disappointed when you look forward to the destination, because you get there and then you go, okay, now what? I'm here, but yet life is still going on. So I've always adopted like the life's a journey, not a destination philosophy. And so for me, I'm glad that the ride is still going. Having that position, it's an honor. I'm thankful every day that for Carl Freitag and for Flat Top, for kind of being those two pioneers and having that vision. And I'm thankful that I forged a good relationship with Carl, and that we had his blessing to carry on. And so I mean, it's kind of generic to say it means a lot, but I just kind of take it in stride. I don't think about it too much in terms of like having the title and all that. I'll tell you what, having gone to so many conventions, I mean, I don't know how many I've covered. At one point, I had a count going, but I'm sure combined with all the organizations over the years, starting from 1998, when I went to the WBA convention in Bangkok just to meet the Galaxy brothers, and I did. I'm sure I'm well over like 50 combined conventions. And but there would be so many people, refs, judges, like you said, oh, that was the first page I go to on the morning, and so on and so forth. And they thought I was Fight News, and Fight News was me. And I said, no, I'm just a lowly cub reporter, and I said, no, there's somebody else owns it, and so on and so forth. But Carl was always kind of a guy, in the shadows, behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And so now it's kind of interesting to let people know, hey, remember how you always used to ask me? Well, now I am the editor-in-chief of Fight News. So, and it's only been one convention so far. There's still a few more to go, but everybody knows I've kind of put the word out just to let them know that the presidents of the other organizations. And so yeah, I mean, it's an honor. It means that to me, and I will try to my best, and the team is going to try their best to not just keep it going, but bring it back to its glory that it once had, and I am more than confident that we will. And I've gotten good responses so far from a lot of people.
I tell you what, I was very happy to hear that you took over that role, and I'm looking forward to all of the future changes and updates and stuff you guys are going to be doing. And I have no doubt in my mind that you will maintain being the best boxing news website out there, because in my opinion, you never were not the best. So it's only going to get better and better. And once you guys, get some stuff cooking, you got to keep us posted, because we'd love to have you come back on again.
Oh, definitely.
And, as a matter of fact, you should come on more often. I mean, we live in the same state. You're not even that far from me, really. What are you? You're in Syracuse area, right?
I am in Syracuse, right in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm not even in a suburb.
So I'm like 2.5 hours from you. I'm in Lake George. See, the problem with me is I'm east of you, so there's no shortcut. I gotta go west, and then I have to go south and then west to you.
Well, I mean, it's not a problem. It's the only way there is,
I know. No,
go south and west, or west and south.
there's everyone says, oh, there's a shortcut. Yeah, but you get caught behind a hay truck, and now that 2.5 hour drive is a 5 hour drive.
Oh yeah. I've I'm sure also that we've been. Did you ever cover Adam Neary's shows, the Aries promotions there?
Yes.
When he was doing those at the Egg and at the, I don't know, Franklin Armory, and there was those, and also Lisa Elovich.
Elovich did a lot of. She did them at the Albany Armory, which was not the hottest place to go.
No, it was rustic, but it was kind of cool. It was a gritty place. But remember, she would do those in Saratoga during the horse racing weekend too. And
yes, she always had one there.
Yeah, and
Bob
she
Miller
had an unbelievable knack for marketing, and she would tie that show every year in with the horse racing weekend and pack the place.
And now she's selling vodka. She's got a vodka. But I'll tell you, I even went to what's the name of that? Hamburg.
Oh yeah.
I went to a couple of shows up there, and as a matter of fact, I met Charlie Fitch when he was just starting out as a referee, and we both know that he's turned out to be one of the best referees.
Oh man, I'm so happy for Charlie. The opportunities that I don't even want to say gotten, that he has earned.
He's earned them. No, he's a great referee. I tell you, when people ask me about referees, I'm not even going to mention names, but there's several that I think are so overrated. That it's always been, in my opinion, fighter A versus fighter B. There's a lot of referees out there that think it's fighter A versus fighter B featuring referee so-and-so. No. And Charlie, the two best referees that I think right now, Charlie Fitch and Harvey Dock. Those two, in my opinion, are the best, because half the time you don't remember who the referee was, and that's an indication, at least in my opinion, of a good refereeing job. That means I got to watch the fight, you know.
Yeah, well, and they both fit the role, as you said, of
I've been corrected. It's not vodka she's selling. It's
it's tequila, right?
Yeah. I have vodka under mine, but no,
yeah.
Dax just corrected me. It's
the teetotaler knew it was tequila.
yeah. But anyway, Boxing Bob Newman, I appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us. The people
appreciate you having me.
Appreciate it, and keep me posted on the progress with the site. I know we've talked about some things together, and hopefully we can make stuff happen. But either way, I want you back on the show as soon as you can.
All right, man. Thank you so much, and you know, it's a pleasure. And fans, keep listening, keep watching.
Well, I'll be seeing you ringside hopefully soon. You know,
you will. There's a February rumor for Turning Stone, so keep that under you.
The last time you gave me a rumor, then remember, I'm like, what happened? And then everything got canceled.
Unfortunately, it was going to be a decent show with a big promoter. I won't say who. And my inside guy with that company, he couldn't even tell me why. The whole thing just fell apart. So
wasn't it a rematch with Ford or something? Wasn't Ford going to be on that card?
Well, I don't know, because then he moved up in weight, and that didn't happen. But this is inside scoop from the commission. So at least they're prepared. So I mean, if the promoter pulls a switcheroo, then I guess there's nothing anybody can do about it, which is what happened. In that last show that got canceled a year ago. But hey, if nothing else, we know we're going to see each other in June at the Hall of Fame.
There you go. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Keep in touch.
Thanks, man.
All right, take her easy. That's Boxing Bob Newman, the new editor-in-chief of Fight News, and what a great guy. I'm sure you've seen him ringside. Going to fights. He's always the big guy with the best seat in the house with the dungaree jacket on. That's Boxing Bob. And like I said in the beginning of the show, he introed me for my New York State Hall of Fame induction, which was really cool. He even lied to everybody. He told them I always have a smile on my face. Come on, man. I don't always have a smile, but